God's grace to you. Peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. We're on Revelation 17 tonight. This is a fantastic chapter. What happened at the end of Revelation 16? At the end of Revelation 16, God judged Babylon and made her drain the cup of the fury of his wrath. And then basically the world ended at that point. And every island fled away. No mountains were to be found. I think when that happens, pretty much we're done. Right? That's the end of the world. If no mountains are left and no islands are left, that's the end of the world. So once again, we've seen yet another end of the world in the book of Revelation, which again lends its credence to our belief about the book of Revelation, that it teaches us about the end of the world many times from different angles, and it's not to be read chronologically. Like chapter 17 comes chronologically after chapter 16 in time. It's just another way of looking at the same events. That's going to be very important, especially when we get to Revelation 19 and 20, because a lot of people read that as chronological, and then you have 1,000-year reign after the end of the world again and all that stuff. So, all right, so at the end of Revelation 16 was the end of Babylon. And here we're going to see another destruction of Babylon and a different angle of it so we get to understand it even better. Remember when God gave dreams to Pharaoh or to Nebuchadnezzar? When the dream was doubled, that means the thing was certain and sure to happen. Here, if you have even more than doubles, you have like 7 times the world ends in Revelation, how much more sure is it true, the things that God has foretold and determined ahead of time in the course of history to happen? So here, let's read it. Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who is seated upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and with the wine of whose fornication the dwellers on earth have become drunk." And he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of blasphemous names, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, and bedecked with gold and jewels and pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her fornication. And on her forehead was written a name of mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of harlots and of earth's abominations. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. When I saw her, I marveled greatly. But the angel said to me, "Why marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns that carries her." Let's stop there for the moment. So here, did you guys get the sheet handout for tonight? No? Oh, it's on the printer back there. If you want to grab that, Lynn. It should be printed out in the printer. Yeah, I printed 20 copies. But at any rate, I'll just read it to you anyway. So who are the 3 persons described in verses 1 to 2, not counting one of the 7 angels here? And not counting John either. Come, so the angel, one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls, came and said to me, that's to John, "Come, I'll show you the judgment of the great harlot, who is seated upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and with the wine of whose fornication the dwellers on earth have become drunk." So we've got 3 major players in this chapter that are being described for us. What are they? Here's the overall picture. We've got a beast. Let's hand out the sheets here first.
Do you need one?
No, I got this here. Thank you. All right, so you can see all of it here. This is the same picture as this one, obviously, but I made it on my computer so that it's easier for you to see. We've got a harlot, a whore, a prostitute, a woman who sells her body for sex to those she's not supposed to be selling it to. She is unfaithful to her husband, the adulterous woman. And So that's one character. The second character is the beast she's riding, a horrific beast with 7 heads and 10 horns, wicked and foul and sinister, and they're both scarlet and also purple and other things. And then the third player here is the waters under that, because it looks like it's not a living thing, but in this vision, that is symbolic of a person or persons, as we'll see. So those are the 3 characters we've got here. Boom, boom, boom. 1, 2, and 3. And they're all contained in that picture of the harlot. All right. So let's consider, how is the beast described? That's question number 2. How do we describe the beast? 7 heads, 10 horns, and it is scarlet, right? Why do you think scarlet? Blood. Yeah, this blood. It's a bloody beast. It's ravenous. It's also like the great red dragon of Revelation chapter 12. So the dragon is red, symbolic of evil, fire, wickedness, and blood, because it's a murderer. And it's full, the beast is full of blasphemous names, right? Verse 3. I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of blasphemous names. So that is a beast that is Antichrist. So this is Antichrist we're looking at. This is actually all together, these 2 together are Antichrist. And as we'll see, the waters are those who follow Antichrist. This is kind of interesting, because we normally think of Antichrist as one person, right? But here in Revelation, we've seen several times that the Antichrist appears in 2 forms, working together. In this case, you have a harlot that's kind of good looking, sexy, alluring, but she is just as evil as the wicked, foul-looking beast upon which she's riding. And the 2 work in consort together, in harmony, in a sense, even though they really ultimately hate each other, but they're working together in tandem under the devil's authority for wickedness in the earth. All right, so it's a beast, scarlet, blasphemous names. We'll pick up with the other part later. 7 heads and 10 horns, etc. Now, how is the woman positioned with respect to the beast? Sitting upon it. All right, so kind of in a somewhat a leadership position, working with it, riding it, going in the same direction, the beast allowing her to ride him. So they're working together, if you will. They are on the same team under the devil. All right. Okay. So they're on the same mission. But as we'll see later on in this chapter, ultimately they hate each other, and the beast hates the woman, but they still work together for a time. We'll explain that. I'll do my best. How is the woman described in this picture? Okay. Yep. So she is, let me see, I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast. Okay. The woman was arrayed, verse 4, in purple and scarlet. Royally. Right. She's like a queen. As she says later, a queen I sit, sorrow, mourning I shall never see, we hear in the next chapter. So she thinks she's royal, glorious, wealthy, full of jewels, adornments. Notice she's bedecked. I like that word in the RSV here anyway. I don't know if yours says that. Adorned. I like bedecked. It's the old English. Huh?
Kind of suggests that she has plied her trade successfully.
Yes, she's plied her trade successfully. So she's sold herself, she's sold her body to commit fornication, adultery. She's an adulteress. Sold herself, and she's done a good job of it, as Ian's saying, because she's got lots of money on account of having sold her body. Bedecked with gold and jewels and pearls. So that's not just a little wealth, that's fabulous wealth. She has amazing worldly riches. Worldly, notice.
Yeah, this sounds like the Catholic Church.
Yeah, we're going to get to that.
Sorry.
You've
yeah,
already,
that's-
were you letting the cat out of the bag earlier?
Yeah.
The scarlet beast out of the
The
bag?
dragon out of the bag.
The dragon out of the bag? Okay, and this is really the sickest part of all to me. If you think of this vision of the woman, what is she holding in her hand? Holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her fornication. That's sicko. That's really disgusting. Because she's drinking out of a golden cup which she claims to be really royal and wonderful, and she's delighting in the gold. I think the gold to me speaks of her delight in what she's drinking. And yet what is in it? Abominations, impurities of her fornication. Now if you think about that I don't want to get too much that way in a public setting, but if you think of issues, as it says in the Bible, like the issue of horses is the issue of her neighbors, the ones she's gone lustily after. God uses that language in the Old Testament, how Israel was an adulterous wife to God and committed fornication with her neighbors and going after the Baals, the Ashtaroths, demons. And she was like with the neighing of horses, each one neighing for his neighbor's wife. And he says with the Assyrians there, or the Egyptians, their issue, namely their semen, is like the issue of horses. It's disgusting, And in her cup, I hate to have to say this, but that exactly, Vivian, that is my face. It's like, even the thought of it. But God's using pretty vivid imagery here to show how wicked it is to sin against him. Rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. And this woman is bewitching in her beauty, her alluring attractiveness towards evil and foul practices. And so she's actually drinking this. Her orgies, really. With whom? With the kings of the earth, etc. Let's just jump back up for a second to the top here. Come, I'll show you the judgment of the great harlot who is seated upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication. So who does this harlot have sex with spiritually? The kings of the earth. The rulers of this world, which could be then woman and beast sexuality in this case, a real bestial disgustingness, namely that she, the woman, we'll describe her in a moment, is selling her soul and her true position to be bride to Christ. She's selling in it to go in after the world and her ways, and to commit fornication with the kings of the earth, who are also antichrists. So these two are images of Antichrist in the world, I believe, today, and throughout time, that have continually worked together in adulterous practices against God. All right? With whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and with the wine of whose fornication the dwellers on earth have become drunk. We're going to pick up more with the woman in a second, but who are the dwellers on earth who have become drunk? She is seated upon many waters. As we're going to hear later in the chapter, the waters are multitudes of peoples, the inhabitants of the earth. All right, so what we're going to see here ultimately, yes?
In Genesis, the Spirit of God is upon the waters.
Good point. Yeah, it should be the Spirit of God upon the waters
Yeah.
in Genesis 1 verse 3 or so, or 2. And here, she's upon the waters, namely the multitudes of the nations, peoples, nations, tongues, and etc.
Reminds you of the 7 days of creation.
It does remind you in the 7 days of creation.
Unwinding.
In a twisted, wicked, devilish, antichrist way. The devil, as they say, is a great canifer or a mimicker or a mocker of God. He doesn't invent something new. He takes God's stuff and turns it backwards. plays music backwards, writes things backwards. Who is that? Aleister Crowley, who is the great sorcerer, witchcraft, necromancer, wicked wizard of this last century, wrote the Satanic Bible. He said the great secret isn't doing things backwards. We're doing everything, so it's sick. Writing backwards. That's kind of telling too. I hate to burst anyone's bubble here, but if you think about who's the guy that does that, the guy who wrote.
Beatles?
No. Well, they might have done it too, but the Christian singer, our God is an awesome God. He reigns. Michael W. Smith. If you look at I think he's the one that wrote that. Michael W. Smith, if you look at his album covers, he spells his name backward. He spells his name backwards with runic alphabet letters. We can get into that some other day. And actually, he's standing on one of those in a very strange occultic position in the snow on his winter album on a chair, which also spells out his name's the Michael W. Smith, the letters of his name, and he's standing, and part of himself is one of the runic letters. It's like either he was totally nuts and the producers were making him do something he didn't know, or he was engaged in some really sinister, evil, wicked stuff. But that's another story for another day. All right. Maybe we can look at that sometime if you want to. It is. It's bad, yeah. A lot of things have crept in. In fact, see this picture? That's the harlot. And in fact, I have a picture here for you. There's the harlot, right? Now we're getting a little off track. I was trying to kind of cover this whole chapter today. We'll see what we can do. But that picture, if you relate that to Amy Grant's one song, I forget, I have to look up the song which it was. But she does, I know, I'm sorry. She does, I know. All right, sorry you came tonight. But if you look up her song, I'll have to look up which one it is, but she does a music video, and that's how she dresses, by the way, in the red. And then she, at one point in the song, flashes quickly her hands, which have hexagrams on them. Like, so, I'm so sorry. Yeah, she flashes it. I mean, I like her voice, and some of her songs I liked and stuff like that. But at any rate, you got to check into things. And either, once again, she didn't know what she was doing, and the producers made her do something she didn't understand, or she was in the know about it, which is even worse. At any rate. But see, she's very seductive, this harlot. She's kind of good looking, I would say, drawing men after her like a lure, like a worm on the hook, if you will. The kings of the earth commit fornication with her because they like the way she looks. And as John is going to say in a moment, he marvels to behold her. I mean, she's like bewitching.
Have you ever looked into Little Red Riding Hood?
No.
There might be something sinister.
Little Red Riding Hood. Anytime you look into something, it's like you peel the onions. Like, if you want to enjoy certain things, don't look into them too much. The more you look into most things in this life, if it's not of Christ and the world, you're kind of happier living in ignorance sometimes. It's been that way for me. Sometimes I can't even enjoy stuff that I used to enjoy because it's like I knew too much. The man who knew too much. If I'd only not studied that, I could have still enjoyed that.
You change what you eat if you saw it under the microscope.
That's true. You change what you eat if you actually understand where things come from, right? Okay, now we're really off track. Okay, going back here. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, bedecked with gold and jewels and pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her fornication. Next line, verse 5. And on her head was a name of mystery written, Babylon the Great. So what did we see at the end of the last chapter? We saw the destruction of Babylon. Here's another description of the destruction of Babylon. Babylon the Great, mother of harlots and of earth's abominations. So all false religious ideas, all empty, vain philosophies, all false gospels, all cursing of the true gospel, all evils of the world, she's the mother of them, out of whom they've sprung. And of earth's abominations, of all their wickedness. harlotries, foul and evil deeds. She's the mother of them all. That's a pretty sinister condemnation written on her forehead. Remember, what's written on a Christian's forehead? The name of the Father and of the Lamb. What's written on her forehead should be that, if she's supposed to be the bride of Christ, and yet what's really written on her? Adulteress, basically. She is mother of harlots and of earth's abominations. Yeah.
It was customary for Roman prostitutes to wear a headband with their name on it too. It's another link to Rome.
Isn't that interesting? I didn't know that. It was the customary of Roman prostitutes in the ancient world to wear a headband with their name written across the headband. Wow, that's fascinating. I didn't know that. That's great. I mean, bad, but great to hear, to understand. All right, so this is the spring, the fountain from which flow all of earth's evils. And I saw the woman, says John, drunk with the blood of the saints and of the martyrs, and the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. So what is this woman inebriated by? She's intoxicated. She's out of her mind, delirious, and happy about it. She's drunk with blood. Whose blood? The blood of saints, Christians. She's drunk with the blood of Christians and of martyrs. Martyrs who stand up. Martyr is actually a Greek word. Martyreo means to bear witness. Those who bear witness even unto death. You could think of John Huss. You could think of William Tyndale. You can think of all those who have been killed for confessing the truth of Jesus Christ. Thomas Cranmer in England, Archbishop of Canterbury. You could say something?
Yeah, it's in verse 2, when it says she's drunk with the wine of her fornication.
Right. She's drunk with two things.
Yes.
She's drunk with the intoxication of enjoying the worldly powers, the rulers, the kings of this earth, and drunk with destroying Christians. So from her is flowing all sources of evil, like as from a fountain, a wicked fountain. All right. So she brands as heretics and kills those who are true Christians, and gives those who give testimony to Jesus. Okay, Kretzmann, the commentary, says the kingdom of Antichrist is the devil's harlot. Since he is a murderer from the beginning, she has joined him in shedding the blood of saints and the witnesses of Christ until she is in a continual state of inebriation as a result of the great amount of blood which she's consumed. No wonder that John stood fascinated by the very horror of the woman's aspect. And if you read in the Old Testament in Hosea, Israel, who is supposed to be the bride of Christ, is likened often to a false wife, a harlot, an adulteress. Like in Hosea 2:11. Remember, Hosea is to marry a woman, Gomer, right, who is a harlot, because God says, because my people are harlots. I'm the husband, they're the harlot, because they're going after the Baals and the Ashtaroths and the devils and the demons. And God says in Hosea 2:11, I will put an end to all her mirth, her feasts, her new moons, her Sabbaths, and all her appointed feasts. And I will lay waste her vines and her fig trees, of which she said, these are my hire, wages, right, which my lovers have given me. I will make them a forest, and the beasts of the field shall devour them. And I will punish her for the feast days of the Baals, when she burned incense to them and decked herself with her ring and jewelry, and went after her lovers and forgot me, says the Lord. So this woman is to Christ, just like Israel of the Old Testament was betrothed to Christ, but she's forgotten the Lord and gone after lovers who profited her nothing but actually want to consume her in the end. Comment?
The true church, the false church.
Yes, that's the next comment. Good, yes.
Well, as far as harlots go, this lady might as well have the name Rahab the harlot, because because that's what every sentence says, the harlot.
The harlot, yeah.
The harlot, Rahab the harlot, but she was a good woman.
Yeah, she got saved through faith.
Help spies.
Mhm. Yeah, Rahab, unfortunately, has forever the name Rahab the harlot attached to it, right? How would you like that as your name? Like Thomas the Doubter,
Jesus' lineage.
right? Doubting Thomas. You're forever known as that. Everybody gets to heaven, meets you. Oh, you're Thomas? Oh, I always talked about you as Doubting Thomas. But he's here. Actually, he does some great things at other times. You could say some things about many of them, right? What would you call Samson? What would you call, for what he did and stuff, etc. So let's talk about first, what is John's reaction to this woman? I marveled greatly to behold her. So I wrote here, she's bewitching. I like that word. Bewitching carries with it not only witchcraft, but also beauty. An alluring power. She's bewitching in beauty, but also in evil and lasciviousness and disgusting bloodshed. So many in the world today marvel at the beauty of her adornments, yet they are mistaken. For man looks on the outward appearance of things, but God looks upon the heart. She, being the devil's adventuress, masquerades as an angel of light on the outside, but she is inside filled with the spirit of darkness. All right? And a couple quotes here from the Old Testament, then I'll describe who I believe these are. Remember, like a gold ring in a swine's snout is a beautiful woman without discretion, says Proverbs chapter 11. So if you see a really gorgeous looking girl and she's alluring and attracting you away from your wife, think of her just as a gold ring in the snout of a pig. Oh, man, remember Cindy Stowe shared with me last weekend after the Bible study that she'd seen a girl at Walmart that was walking around in a tiny, tiny bikini. And I'm like, I think I saw that girl. Because I was at Walmart a couple of weeks ago on Sunday. I was going home, and I remember walking through the vegetable section. And I was like, whoa, this person was young and skinny and had basically no clothes on. The bikini was barely, and it reminds me of that line from James Bond where he says, that's a nice little nothing you're almost wearing. And it didn't quite cover the backside, and it barely covered the front side, and then sandals, that was the only other thing she was wearing. And I just was like, woo, I'm out of here. And then I went over to get some avocados, and she came over to get some avocados and asked if she could have one of those little bags to put the thing in. I'm like, here, take mine. I was like, I just walked away. I'm like, I don't need to be around here. And that image bothered me for quite a little while. I'm like, but I'm thinking, like a gold's ring in a swine's snout is a beautiful woman without discretion. She's beautiful, but she's not obviously a Christian. No Christian's going to do that, right? So that's kind of what we're looking at here. All right. So let's go on to, his bewitching, she's an adventuress. Okay, for the commandment is a lamp and the teaching of light, and the reproofs of discipline are the way of life, to preserve you from the evil woman, from the smooth tongue of the adventuress. Do not desire her beauty in your heart, and do not let her capture you with her eyelashes. For a harlot may be hired for a loaf of bread, but an adulteress stalks a man's very life, says the scriptures. So we got to escape the woman. Now, men have trouble looking at a woman. Maybe women have trouble looking at a man. But in this case, it's a spiritual woman that men and women all have trouble looking at. All right? She's bewitching. And Proverbs 2, one more, says, you will be saved from the loose woman and from the adventuress with her smooth words, who forsakes the companion of her youth and forgets the covenant of her God. For her house sinks down to death, and her paths to the shades. None who go to her come back, nor do they regain the paths of life. All right. So let's talk about who we believe these people to be in the image here. So we've got the woman on the beast and the waters. Who are these? Antichrist. Antichrist and the world that follows them. The beautiful woman is the false church, the apostate church, who should be the bride of Christ, who should be pouring forth purity and salvation and loyalty to her one husband, Jesus Christ, yet she's forsaken that and gone after other lovers whom she should not be going after. She's thrown in her lot with the kings of the world, with that which is of this life and of the flesh and of sin and of the devil. So she's forsaken the companion of her youth, Christ, her true husband, and she's gone after wickedness and sold her body, sold her soul to evil. Who is the ultimate? Well, let's just say this first. The beast so this is the spiritual antichrist, the false church. The beast is the antichrist, I believe, of the worldly powers, the wickedness that's in the world but doesn't pretend to be Christian. This one looks good but is evil. This one is evil, looks evil. Okay? And then the waters underneath it are all of the peoples of the world that, because of their power and their authority and their beauty, they throw in their lot with these because they are deceived by their sorcery.
It's interesting because the Bible often uses water as a symbol of judgment.
Yeah, the Noah's flood and stuff like that. Yeah, symbol of judgment. But they're just the many waters upon which the woman is seated. All right, and so who is the woman ultimately? I believe, it's all the apostate church, all false Christianity, all false church, but really, ultimately, the Roman Catholic Church. And we're going to see why that is later in this chapter. It's actually quite clear. I'll just give you a little hint. Because she's seated upon a beast with 7 heads, which John is going to say, or the angel is going to interpret that for us in just a moment. That's 7 hills upon which the woman is seated. What is the city of 7 hills?
Rome.
You just look it up in the Bible. What is the city of 7 hills, Siri? Bring! Rome. Although there are some other cities around the world that have 7 hills. God, I think, made it that way. I think Jerusalem being one of them.
During this time, the Roman Catholic Church was not established during John's time.
Right. So
It would have been the emperors that's sitting on, like Caligula, Nero, all those people, right? It's not the church. Or am I wrong?
Well, this part is going to be the church, because remember, this is prophecy. Because the whole book of Revelation is to tell us what is and what is to come hereafter, before the coming of Christ. So it's a prophecy of the end of the world, from John's days till Christ comes. So yeah. So it was already established even actually when John was writing, because when John is writing in his first letter, he says in chapter 2, Beloved, it's the last hour, for you know that for Antichrist is coming, and now many Antichrists have already come. Therefore, we know that it is the last hour. They went out from us, people in the early church went out with the apostles, but they were not of us. For if they'd been of us, they would have continued with us, but they went out that it might be plain that they all are not of us. So even in John's day, the harlot was already growing, but had not yet reached her full maturity, if you will. So yeah, that's pretty sick. And so I believe that is Rome. Ultimately, the ultimate leader of the false religions of the world and the Pope. As I'll show you why a little later. But notice, what is in her hand again? A golden cup. Well, notice first of all, she's bedecked with gold and jewels and pearls.
Yeah, Roman Catholic Church.
You said that earlier, the Roman Catholic Church bedecked with wealth, fabulous beyond imagination, and lots of beauty and show and ornamentation, worldly wealth, and in her hand is a golden cup full of her abominations. So she's commingling with the kings of the earth, the world powers of Antichrist in the world, amongst kings, but also, what's also in that cup? The blood of true Christians. And look down through history. Look at John Huss, who was killed for simply saying that we need to get back to the Bible and not go after just popes and councils. And they killed him. And he was called the Goose. His name means the goose. He was the Bohemian? Cook. Yeah, that's what Martin Luther said of John Huss, who was killed at the stake by the Roman Catholic Church for just saying, let's get back to the Bible, basically. 100 years or so before Luther, his name means goose, and so Luther said his goose was cooked. And then there was supposedly a prophecy of a swan coming, which some say was Luther after that. But Luther actually was charged. They said, the Catholic Church said in his day, you're a Hussite. And he's like, what's a Hussite? And he has a little break in the debate. He goes over to the library on campus, reads about John Huss, and he comes back, he says, I guess I am a Hussite.
Okay, amen.
Right? They would have killed Luther if they could have. They've burned many people at the stake for what? Confessing, or take the Lollards, the followers of not William Tyndale, but John Wycliffe, who translated the Bible. The Lollards. And what they would do, they'd write the Bible, handwritten in those days, then they would capture them, the Catholic Church would, the translated Bible into English, and so I read, they would tie the Bible around their necks, hang them with it, and burn them for distributed English copies of the Bible. And also, same thing with William Tyndale. He was distributing copies of the English translation of the Bible, and they caught him and strangled him first and then burned him. And they also, so anyway, in her was found, she's drunk on the blood of the martyrs of Jesus, those who give testimony, the saints. So that fits as well. But I'll explain more why I believe the Pope today is commingling with the rulers of the world to establish a final end times revival of the Roman Empire. Because remember, okay, now who is this? So that's the spiritualized Roman Empire, false church. This is the Roman Empire, basically, in the world, the kingdom of Antichrist. If you go back to Revelation 13, how many beasts did we see? Two beasts. And what did they look like?
One looks bad, one looks good.
Exactly. Both are evil. These tapes always fold up on me. Hang on. So you've got, in this scene, you've got the beast over here. Remember, you've got an evil-looking, we showed to be, the beast was the Roman Empire, basically, because we looked at Daniel 7 and 8. Reconstituted. And this is so much more to say tonight. I won't get through this for sure. But we'll get as far as we can. And then there also, the other beast in Revelation 13 was what? The same team, the devil's team, but it looked good. It had the two horns like a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon. This one looked foul, wicked, and evil, and it was evil. This one looked good, but it was foul, wicked, and evil. And the two, remember, in Revelation 13, worked together. So what we're seeing in this chapter is the same thing, just in a different angle so that we can get it more driven in and understand better who it is and what it is. All right, so isn't that pretty neat? So this chapter helps us to interpret this chapter. This chapter helps us to interpret this chapter. And so, wow. We're going to take a look at, remember in this chapter, this had one of its, 7 heads, right? And 10 horns. What do we see in this beast? 7 heads and 10 horns. What do we see in Daniel? The beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. So it's the same thing each time. That this is going to interpret the 7 heads and 10 horns for us better. Remember, this had one of its heads had a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed, which I don't know the interpretation of that, but I wonder, it might be that the Roman Empire, as we know in history, was nixed, went away, but it still kind of continued, especially in the Church of Rome. But then the Antichrist spirit continued, but maybe towards the end of time, that Roman Empire, the mortal wound is healed, and towards the end of time, there's a semblance, remember, an image of the beast, a semblance of the Roman Empire that arises toward the end of time, which was what? A one-world government. I always used to think, where do people get a one-world government? I don't see that in the Bible. But if you're looking at the Roman Empire, that was like a one-world government, so maybe that's what it is. And I will give you evidence next week that the Pope The Pope has been calling for a one world government for decades and is getting louder and closer together, a clarion call, and I have the documents here, where he has been calling, especially in this COVID crisis, we need to get rid of basically countries, turn them into states and provinces, get a one world government. We need one court over all the nations, one international court, one world government. I'm like, I don't know if that's the case. Sorry, this keeps turning over sideways here, but so I don't know if that's the case, and I don't know if that's the right interpretation. But remember, this one and this one's working together. This one's working together, and it would seem like the Pope together today is working with the rulers of this world in consort in the establishment more and more of the kingdom of Antichrist towards the end of time, which has always been here. But that's a great example because they will not get very far. They will fall. I always say this, and we're going to have to conclude here tonight and pick up with the interpretation next week. But always remember this. The wonderful news of the book of Revelation is that as the kingdom of Antichrist is working to attack the church, wage war in the church and such things, and bring their plans to fruition, they don't get very far. They have their plans, they start enacting them, and God hammers them right and left. Their kingdom falls into darkness, and they never get off the ground. It's like I said last week with the Battle of Britain, or a plane in the World War II movies. They're starting to take off while the enemy planes are in the air. Let's say the enemy plane is a good guy, God. The enemy's just trying to take off from the ground. He's running across, and he's just starting to take off, and in comes the fighter, and just goes brrrr, and he never even gets off the ground. That's pretty much the kingdom of Antichrist. God is going to just never let them bring their plans to fruition. They'll never have their perfect one world government. I mean, they'll get a little distance into it, and it'll be hard for Christians, for sure. I'm not saying it's not terrible days, but God never lets them get to where they think they're going to get. The fulfillment of John Lennon's song, Imagine, where there's no heaven and above and no earth below, and no hell below, and no countries, no boundaries, we're all just living as one, la, 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 all that stuff.
That's her song. See, that's the fall of Rome.
That's the fall of Rome. Yep, and then it was somewhat revived. I was going to say one last thing. What was it? Oh, you guys missed this last week, but I'll just repeat it because I think it's great. And I'm going to keep repeating this while we do Revelation, is to some degree, we Christians have to serve as bait towards the end of time, if I can say that reverently. Namely, as I said last week, it's sort of like God ties his little lamb up with a little rope outside the bear's cave. And the bear's like sniffing and sees this little lamb, the church, is vulnerable. I'm going to come out and get them because they're now in a state of weakness, and it comes out of its cave and is starting to get up to roar. Meanwhile, God's like to the little lamb, don't worry, I got this. And he's sitting over in his little blind behind the trees, just zeroing in his scope. And he's like, check the wind. All right, just a little further. Yep. Just as it approaches the lamb never gets touched. Not a hair of your head shall perish, says the Lord Jesus Christ. And down goes the enemy. So we've seen that in Egypt when they fled to the Red Sea. God used his people entrapped in the wilderness to draw Pharaoh out of his cave. He came after Pharaoh. They're entrapped. They're helpless. I'm going to come get them. And God says, watch this. Now watch what I'll do. Right this way, my people. Right through the sea. And Pharaoh, when he attempts to do the same, he does the same at the city of Ai. He's done the same at other places. Ambush. God sets up ambushes. And towards the end of time, I believe God is setting up an ambush for the devil. And we have to be willing to be a little bit presented as weak, tied up, helpless. And this is a noble, heroic task God's given to us, to be the lamb, to draw out the bad guy. But don't worry, God's got it totally under charge, and he's going to make sure he takes care of you and then dispatches your enemy. at the right time. And that's a theme through Revelation. So when we read about this stuff and it seems kind of scary, God's got it. He's taking care of you. He's going to deliver us. He's working his plan of the ages to bring evil to nothing and to exalt you. And as Daniel says, the time shall come for the kingdom, for the kingdom to be given to the saints of the Most High. And they shall possess it forever. Because we're the true bride of Christ who've stayed with him. All right? So we'll pick up more next week on the next verses, and we'll see exactly what these 7 heads are, 10 horns are, and actually make this so clear that it's basically virtually told us it's Rome. In Revelation 17, the rest of it. Okay, anything else?